you ever get like attacked by the Freemasons for doing this?
They're exposing you to spiritual darkness.
And are people so in at this point it doesn't freak them out, or?
Yeah, it went like right over my head. They never really tell you in the lodge what the ultimate purpose is, and that's by design, because if they tell you this stuff, you're going to freak out, you're going to leave.
It's fascinating to me how many Christians think they can also be a Freemason.
They're basically telling you in, comforting language, they're using demons.
Life is wild. Faith, marriage, parenting, work, all of it. 1 minute you're inspired, the next you're in chaos. That's why I started No Longer Nomads, the podcast that throws you into the deep end of real stories and authentic truth. We're talking ex-witches who found freedom, former Muslims who met Jesus, mountaineers who even survived the wilderness for 6 days, and much, much more. No Longer Nomads, because no one was meant to wander alone. New episodes drop every Tuesday at 5 a.m.
What's up, guys? Welcome to this episode of No Longer Nomads. This is part 2 of the interview with John Moscato. We talk about Freemasons. Go back and listen to episode 1, part 1 if you haven't. It's fantastic. We go deeper. It gets deeper and darker, and John was super gracious with his time. It was so good. We want to put this into 2 parts. So thanks for sticking around, and we'd love to hear from you. Make sure to write into the show about future guests. Make sure to give us a like and subscribe. Follow the newsletter, and hopefully we'll have an event. We'll come to see you soon.
Denis interrupts the person who's explaining this to us, and he says, just so that you're aware, we're not actually going to harm you. This is all spiritual. This is symbolic. Because later on, they show us the penal sign for the entered apprentice. You have to put your feet at a 90-degree angle, and you basically make a sign where you cut your own throat. And part of the Masonic oath at for the entered apprentice is that if I should betray my oath, I agree to have my throat slit from ear to ear. So again, Denis interrupts and he says, we're not actually going to slit your throat. What this actually means is that if you betray your oath and you betray the secrets of the order, you will be cut off from the egregore of the group. What's an egregore? That's an excellent question. It's a kind of entity that is created when, let's say you're at a hockey game or a basketball game, if you prefer.
Yeah.
And everyone is cheering, wanting a specific team to win. According to them, this desire creates a kind of entity that has its own will, because all these people are focused on one specific desire. Okay. And that creates an autonomous entity, which they call an egregore, that can actually cause things to happen in the natural.
Interesting.
So they tell us that, if you betray your oath, you'll just be cut off from the group. Gotcha. Fair enough. But it was perplexing because they also had on their altar, they had a Bible, and they asked us to take that oath and to kiss the Bible. So I thought to myself, okay, these people are legit because they use the Bible. The problem is that you and I have an understanding of the scriptures because we have the Holy Spirit. They take those same words and they ascribe a different meaning to what is said. They basically twist and pervert God's word. So, in spite of them having a Bible, which is procedurally, that's correct for the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite. However, in other obediences, which is a little bit like a denomination, their volume of sacred law doesn't have to be the Bible. In some, it's the Quran. In some, this is something that was explained to us early on, that there are 2 different currents of Freemasonry. There are philanthropic Freemasons who don't believe in a supreme being, which is why the volume of sacred law that is on their altar is just a blank book. And there are those, there's another current of Freemasonry called mystics, which is what our lodge and our Grand Lodge was, whereby we believe in spirits, we believe in these entities, and they make it their goal in these lodges to try to find the true origins of Freemasonry. So they consider themselves a little bit like truth seekers.
Sure. So I've got a question though, John. You just explained that some lodges will use the Bible, some might use Quran, et cetera, et cetera. In terms of the actual initiation ritual, was that unique to your lodge, or is this the same initiation ritual that has been carried on for years and decades and maybe even centuries?
That's a very good question. And in my research, I found out that the initiation process for Freemasons has actually evolved over time. And one of the things I found when I was writing my book was that one of the pillars of Freemasonry is actually Nimrod. And he was so named in earlier, like I'm talking about like 200-300 years ago. Nimrod was named as one of the founders of Freemasonry.
Interesting.
And so later on, they ended up changing that. And because when you get to the third degree, the Master Mason degree, that revolves around a character named Hiram Abiff, who they claim was the architect of Solomon's temple. But in reality, Hiram Abiff is just a pseudonym for Nimrod. So already there, Nimrod, not a great guy, you know, a hunter before the Lord, a man who opposed the Lord, the first post-deluge tyrant. And this is one of the founders of Freemasonry. Not a good look.
Not a good look.
No.
So, John, I do have some questions. Can we talk a little bit about the core degrees? So you have the entered apprentice you were talking about, and then the fellow craft. Is that the intermittent stage? Intermediate stage. The Master Mason, and that's a full membership degree. And I'm just looking at some notes here. The Scottish Rite, that's from degrees 4 through 32. And then the York Rite is obviously the highest. Do you mind explaining a little bit about that? I don't really, for the listeners, I don't know a ton about this stuff, but I'd love just to kind of a quick rundown of some of the degrees there.
Okay. So for your listeners, our lodge and our Grand Lodge were of the obedience of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite, which, as you know, has 33 public degrees. York Rite has fewer, and there are other quote unquote denominations in Freemasonry, like the ancient and primitive order of Memphis Misraim, which I believe has 90 degrees. And they really just break things up a little bit differently. It's all the same teachings. And in fact, I'll go even further because in my research, I don't know if you guys remember someone named William Cooper.
Mm-mm.
He had a radio broadcast called The Hour of the Time. He was assassinated by police, I think, in 2001. Prior to that, he had a show where he delved into a lot of occult topics, and he went pretty deep into some of this stuff. And he had found a book written by Rosicrucians, which was kind of the minutes of a conclave that they held in the early 20th century. And part of the minutes of that book record that whether you call yourself a Freemason or a Rosicrucian or a Martinist or Thelemite, they all have the same fundamental teachings. So all these secret societies have the same fundamental teachings. They all have the same roots. So it doesn't really matter what you call it. And rite of Memphis Misraim, instead of just wearing their regalia over a black suit like we do, they would wear like a judge's toga, like a black toga, and they would wear their regalia over that. They were more of they still are, a more Egyptian flavored Freemasonry.
As I was thinking about this, why are so many elites Freemasons? And I know, like, growing up, people would say, Freemasons, like, you have a good dentist, you have a good, carpenter or whatever, all of these different needs that you have. If you could kind of have, this person's in the fraternity and they can help me out because they're a Freemason. So you see there's like, a connection that you can have in an insider to a good doctor or a good whatever. Why are so kind of two parts here. Why are so many elites in this fraternity as well? I mean, as you get up into this, there's more secrets, there's more, darkness associated with it. Have you, in your studies, come across why so many people are part of this brotherhood that are elites around the globe?
It's not as hard to understand as you would think. It's all about influence. Like if you want to disseminate some knowledge to the masses in the 21st century, you would want an Instagram influencer or something to that effect. Over time, these secret societies have worked in powerful circles with kings, with priests, with people of means, because those people can help them disseminate the message and make it look good. Because you have some people who are true believers, and I'm sure you have some people, from what I can see of the Hollywood crowd.
Yeah.
Some of them are true believers, and I think some of them are just there because it helps their career. And they end up getting swallowed up into this whole system. Yeah. Like the gears just chew them up.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
Ultimately, it's about influence.
So that was what I was thinking. Josh kind of asked the question a different way. And my question, because you read about it and you just a cursory reading, you're looking at people like George Washington, Benjamin Franklin. I 100%. Think I read that Napoleon appointed his brother over the lodge in Paris, et cetera. So all these really, what we think of, at least in the West, well, maybe not Napoleon, but Washington and Franklin, all the rest is really like sort of standout people that we look up to, we put on pedestals. But I digress from that. And the question I have is kind of plays off Josh's, and you just kind of answered it. But it's like, what's the end goal of Freemasonry? All right. So I heard you just say it's influence. It's at a particular time, pre-Instagram, influences and all the rest. If you're part of this, if you're initiated into this, you've arrived in terms of, you're now in the club, right? You're in that club of really legitimate influencers, whether it's economic, whether it's political, whether it's, you name it, right? Is there anything that you would join, any reason why you would join the Freemasons, even back in the 1700s or 1800s? What was the stated purpose of?
Do you remember what I said earlier on about establishing a system of morality that competes with God's system of morality? Well, when you get to the 33rd degree in ancient and accepted Scottish rite, that person is called a sovereign grand inspector general. General as in military general. Mm. So they're basically creating a hierarchy, a structure of soldiers to implement this system of morality that the originator or originators of Freemasonry have come up with. And unfortunately, it gets very dark, because in my research, I found that the God of Freemasonry, the one they call the Grand Architect of the universe, is not Yahweh, is not Jesus, it's not the God of the Bible. It's another entity. And that entity has been called by many names, one of which you would find in the Old Testament called Moloch. And I found this link by studying the Catechism of Freemasonry, because they tell us that there are, when you get to the level of Master Mason, they teach us that there are 3 pillars of Freemasonry. One is Solomon, king of Israel, Hiram Abiff, who was killed, and Hiram, the king of Tyre. And that third one, the king of Tyre, I believe is a kind of double entendre in that you think they're referring to a physical king, because if you read your Bible, you do know that there is a King Hiram who gave King David the materials to build the Temple of Solomon. However, in my studies, I found that there is a deity called the King of the City, or the King of Tyre. And that entity was called Melkart, which is short for Melekart. And that ends up being Moloch of the Old Testament, the god of child sacrifice. So I'm sorry, but this is horrible stuff. And a lot of Freemasons, unfortunately, do not study. They don't really go deep into the material. And I told myself, when I came into this thing, I want to really understand it. I want to know this stuff A to Z so that I can teach it properly.
Sure.
And unfortunately, the things I found just filled me with dread. But it took several years for me to get to that point. Because don't forget, when you come into Freemasonry, you ask for the light. That's part of the initiation process.
Yeah.
And that light is the dark light. But they don't tell you that. See, there's a lot of stuff that happens in the rituals. The first 3 degrees contain all the information that is eventually revealed to the Mason when they get to the 33rd degree.
Okay.
But it's in like onion skin form. And
how much of this has you studied? Sorry to jump in. How much of this have you studied just at 33rd degree? And I think even, I heard you say they're not public, that are secret degrees, but because so much of this is protected, it's secret. I mean, you being on the inside, did you have any inside access at this point? Or were you not quite there yet?
It's funny that you ask that question. That's very well timed, because every June 24th, that's like a Masonic holiday.
Yeah.
And so on that day, all the Masons gather together for their year-end celebration. And strangely enough, in Quebec, June 24th is called St. John the Baptist Day. And every Masonic lodge is called a St. John's Lodge. See, in Freemasonry, they don't view John the Baptist as just a man, the precursor of Jesus Christ. They think of that as a kind of spiritual title. And so for those who are listening to you from Quebec, St. John the Baptist Day is actually a Masonic holiday, but I digress. So during this year-end meeting, Denis literally told us, because everybody is gathered together, all the 100 and some odd members of the Grand Lodge were there. And I have to preface this, is that you need 3 lodges to form a Grand Lodge. Like, you're creating structures here, like you're building. And so this was under the auspices of the Grand Lodge that I was a part of. And during this meeting, during this reunion, Denis literally told us that there are secret degrees above 33, and that the worshipful master, which is the president of my lodge, had just been raised to the 34th degree.
Man.
So you have to understand, I had been a Freemason for maybe about a week at this point. And during this meeting, I'm being told that there are secret degrees above 33. They have no problem telling you this kind of stuff. And they even told us, because the Grand Lodge that I was a part of is also a member of 2 international governing bodies. So when you asked earlier, it wasn't you, it was when you asked earlier about um, uh, the rituals and how are things different in one rite versus another? Well, there have to be certain universal basics that you can fall back on. Like there are obviously the grips that Freemasons give each other. And there's a very specific, I never learned what the word is in English. They call it soudage. It's a series of question and answers that you can have. You can basically have a conversation with another Mason in the company of non-Masons. And it's basically coded transmission. We learn all this kind of stuff so that we can identify other Masons. And all this stuff has to be conformal, because if, let's say, you're traveling to France or to Cuba or to Russia and you want to visit a Masonic lodge there are certain procedures. Like you have to be able to recognize each other. So yes, there are international governing bodies for Freemasonry. Not every lodge, not every Grand Lodge is part of this, but ours was. So we were a member of something called the Masonic Conference of the Americas, and we were a member of another international governing body called the CLIPSUS. So all this to say that there are norms that have to be followed. And we know because as part of our admission into the CLIPSUS, we had investigators sent to us from a lodge in upstate New York to visit us to make sure that our ritual was conformal
Up to code.
Up to code. That, when you're ancient and accepted Scottish Rite, you have to use the Bible. You can't use a blank book. Everything that is said during the opening and closing ceremonies has to conform strictly to this. And I later understood also that during the initiation ceremonies, because a lot of times we would have to initiate a lot of people in order to save time so that this doesn't take up the entire day. There are certain elements of the ritual that you can cut out, which are, I guess you could call superfluous, but there are certain fundamentals that you have to touch on because it activates something in the spirit.
John, I got a question. They're separate. Like they're not necessarily related. The first one, what? I don't even know if there's an answer to this, but in my mind, I want to ask the question: who's in charge now? Like, what lodge or what lodges do you believe hold the most influence over the whole Freemason world, if you will? And then number two, while you've been talking, I think to myself, do you ever get like attacked by the Freemasons for doing this? In other words, I'm not saying necessarily physically attacked, but people trying to impugn your character and all the rest.
I'll answer your second question first. I haven't been physically attacked by any Freemasons. And in fact, because I left in spring of 2016, in 2017, a fellow Mason at the time was getting married, and I was invited to the wedding, which I attended, and a lot of the members of the lodge were there.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than try to intimidate me or anything, they thought their position was basically, please come back. We need people like you.
Interesting.
But I think that's also because of the fact that I was relatively low down. I mean, I got up to the rank of Secret Master, which is the 4th degree.
Mm-hmm.
And that was more than I could handle.
Interesting. Why do you say that?
Because when you become a Freemason, like it or not, you're dealing with demons. And they don't specifically use the term demon, but there are 2 different types of lodge meetings that we had. Blue lodge meetings are held once a month, and those are quote unquote mandatory. Like if you can't make it, they ask that you call in and motivate your absence.
Okay.
But there are also what are called white lodge meetings. And during those white lodge meetings, which are more informal, they have a curtailed opening and closing ritual. And it gives you an opportunity to ask questions and do things that you wouldn't be able to do during a regular Masonic lodge meeting. And those are meant to help you understand the catechism, understand the symbols. You can ask questions. They'll They'll give you quizzes. And another thing that they do is they show you the different aspects of the lodge. And something that I would like to go back to, remember when I said they brought me into a little black room?
Yeah.
With those signs and a candle? Well, that's called the Cabinet of Reflection. And once you've been initiated and you go into the White Lodge meetings, they explain a little bit more about all the stuff that you went through. And so the worshipful master of our lodge was heading this White Lodge meeting. And he said, you know what, we're going to visit the Cabinet of Reflection today. And I want each and every one of you to go in there individually, spend about a minute in there, and come out and tell us what you perceive. Fair enough. So I go in and I sit down and it's quiet. You're not under stress at this point. It's very relaxed. And I realize, I'm looking around, it's like, this room is a portal. This is a portal to the spiritual realm. And when I came out, I told him that, and he says, you're exactly right. When we initiate you, we basically open up a portal to the netherworld, to the dark stuff, and we expose you to this intentionally.
Man,
so they're literally telling you that they're exposing you to spiritual darkness.
And are people so in at this point it doesn't freak them out, or?
Yeah, it went like right over my head, because during another White Lodge meeting, the worshipful master told us that, what we do here in the lodge is a little bit of a distraction. We're keeping you busy so that your spiritual pit crew can work on you. They're basically telling you in, comforting language that they're using demons, that demons are assigned to you, because don't forget, when you take the oath, that's basically you're bringing a curse onto yourself. And you're having demons assigned to you to guide you through your Masonic process.
I do have a question, and I'm on this note. At this point, John, in your personal life, were things getting darker? Were you feeling like your mental health and all that? I mean, were you what was going on at home at this point? Were you in a better state of mind? Were you in a worse state of mind? And also, I'd love to get back to Parker's question too, which is a great one. Just what are some of those giant lodges that are controlling body, if you will?
Okay, so I'll tackle that question first, and then I'll jump into what was happening in my life. So Freemasonry, from what I can gather, and from even what they tell us during the ritual, Freemasonry is an empire. Okay, so there's a structure there, and some people are in charge, but at lower levels. And they never really tell you in the lodge what the ultimate purpose is. And that's by design, because if they tell you this stuff, you're going to freak out, you're going to leave. This is also why we found out when we are undergoing our evaluation to join the Clipsas, there are Masonic quotas that have to be met. That is to say, you can't promote people beyond a certain speed. Like you can't take someone who is just initiated, entered apprentice, and bring them up to the 33rd in a week or anything like that. So there are quotas. And there's a reason for this, is that the Masonic process is a slow boil. They put the frog in cold water and they gradually turn up the heat. Because if they expose you to what they're really doing too quickly, you will freak out, you will leave.
It's methodical.
It's very methodical. And who's in charge?
Intentional is a good word.
Yeah.
Yes. And it operates a little bit like the United Nations. And I don't use that term by accident. Is that everyone just sort of comes to agreements about things in the directions that they have to go. But I believe, and I have not seen this with my own eyes, but based on the way they operate, I believe that they get their marching orders from the Dark Lord, and the various generals and the people who lead the Grand Lodges and the lodges receive this information and implement it.
Yeah.
And one thing that they tell you early on in Freemasonry, there's some of the symbolism that they use, which is the checkerboard floor, the black and white tiles. Well, they tell you as a Freemason that, there's evil and there's good. And you are supposed to walk that fine line of the grout between the light and the dark. But eventually what happens is you can choose to empower the good, or you can empower evil as you wish, because you are your own God.
Yeah.
You can decide right or wrong for yourself. And again, that ties right back to the Garden of Eden.
Yeah, it does.
So in terms of who's really in charge of Freemasonry, on the secular plan, it depends on the jurisdiction.
Okay.
Like I'm sure that some lodges will become more prominent at some points in time and then fade away, and another will come and take its place.
Sure.
But spiritually, I think it's the ultimate bad guy. And
yeah, I hear it, and so I just got back from DC last week, and I went out to Mount Vernon. I went to the Museum of the Bible. Love it. Love being there. And in my mind, when you're talking, I'm picturing sort of, they had on display these Bibles of some of the forefathers from back in the late 1700s, et cetera. And I'm like, I'm trying to reconcile or square rather what I'm hearing from these institutions like the Museum of the Bible or Mount Vernon or whatever with, holy cow, if they're in this, and when they, I mean, any of these guys, right? From Franklin to Washington, whoever, they had to know all this, John.
Yeah.
This is not like you were the only enlightened person that came through it. I mean, I have to accept, I think that, okay, on paper, there are some really good people that were involved in this, right? On paper. But what my mind's not allowing me to reconcile, cognitive indifference, whatever, is, man, but they knew. They had to know. The higher they went up. I mean, you said yourself, I think you said at the fourth degree, you were like, I'm out.
Yeah.
The fourth, and there's 33, right?
Yeah.
The fourth, you were like, no, I ain't doing this. What else you got? Now, obviously, Jesus came in and got a hold of you and all the rest, I'm assuming. But nonetheless, my point being, it's hard for me to reconcile my mind. I'm not saying I don't believe you at all. In fact, I do believe you. That's why I'm having the hard time of reconciling.
Well,
Does
and
that make
another thing,
sense, Josh?
100%. Yeah. And another thing I'm thinking too, John, is how many people go into this. I have a friend, his dad, Freemason, crazy story there. I could go into all the dark demonic things that happened to their home as he was growing up. But it's fascinating to me how many Christians think they can also be a Freemason. And, or I would love to hear your take on this, John. I mean, how can you follow two masters, right? I mean, but it is interesting. So many, at least in my friend's case, his dad, hey, I'm a Christian, by name. I believe in this deeply. I believe in the Bible, but also, I really want to make my way up as many degrees as I can into this Freemasonry, kind of outlet. And so as he's also passing that down to his son who's involved in church. And I'm just thinking, wow, there's two different tracks here. I'm not seeing why they can't see the clear picture, but would you find that's your experience as well?
It's a very layered answer. And
Yeah.
from my perspective, I was spiritually lost because my parents considered themselves Catholic, and we went to mass, maybe not every Sunday, but most Sundays. And, it has a lot to do with what you're taught. If you call yourself a Christian, depending on the church that you go to, do they really preach the word of God? Are they solid on that? Or do they make up a lot of their own material? So that's one aspect. Two is that I did not learn this stuff when I did not learn the true mission of Freemasonry and all the dark secrets when I was still a Freemason. I found this stuff later after
Okay.
a lot of time of reflection and also help from the Holy Spirit. Let's
Sure.
not
Yeah.
That makes
let's
sense.
not hide it. Is that
Yeah.
the Spirit can reveal things to you that otherwise you would not know.
Yes.
And when you're in it, like it or not, you have a veil over your eyes. You ask for light, but in reality, I think what they're doing is they're creating
Cloaking
a
you.
kind of spiritual hoodwink that they put over
Yeah.
the people there. The other aspect is a lot of lodges are more like clubs in that people go in there for political connections, for
Sure.
climb the social ladder. So they don't really dig into the truth of what Freemasonry is because, frankly, they don't care. They just think
They're
that
just there to hang, meet some people, make some
meet
connections.
some
Yeah.
people,
Feel
have a bite to eat.
influential.
Yeah.
Yeah, meet some influence. And also, they, like it or not, you end up bonding with some of the people there who are not necessarily bad in and of themselves because they don't understand what the true point of Freemasonry is. A lot of people in there, myself included, they're just spiritually lost and they're trying to find the truth.
Yeah.
That was my case. I can't ascribe that to everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there are a lot of different reasons why people, let's say, can call themselves Christians and Freemasons, but there are also people who call themselves Christians and they support abortion. So
Yeah. Yeah.
everybody's
good
brain
point.
works a little bit differently, and some never took theirs out of the package.
Yeah.
So,
Great answer.
Yeah, and also the power of feeling connected, the power of feeling wanted, the power of feeling known,
Yeah. Being a part of
the
something.
power of feeling like I'm part of this influential entity. That's all those things are insanely powerful with the human mind, right? In the human psyche. So I can imagine it causes you. It's the devil's playbook, right?
totally.
It's not just the Freemasons. It's anything that creates a false sense of security and false sense of identity. It woos you in. It makes you feel like this is great. This tastes good. This feels good. I feel good, and it makes you feel like you belong. That's it right there. And that I'm assuming, right? Because there are good people in the Freemasons. You one of them. It's not that it blinds you to it in my mind. It's like that those feelings of being wanted, of being known, of being influential, they sort of, push out the truth, for lack of better terms, right?
Worldly
Or the pursuit of it.
desires.
That's
the
right.
desires of the flesh.
That's right. Interesting.
Yeah. John, I'd love to get back to and we're pumped. I mean, this is such a fascinating conversation. We're asking you like a few questions at a time because this is to me so interesting.
is.
And so I'm sorry, I know I asked you a couple of questions a few minutes ago. Let's get back to that. What was happening in your personal life at this time when you were, maybe get up to that 4th degree? What was going on personally for you?
Well, when I came into Freemasonry, I was spiritually curious, but also very lost and very unhappy. And I can tell you that goes right back into my childhood. I can remember a time when I remember this for a specific reason. I was in high school, and one day I was just sitting at my desk before class started. And one of my classmates came up to me and said, "Hi." And I just grumbled at him. And so he went off to talk to somebody else, and I could overhear the conversation. And he said to his friend, "That guy's always in a bad mood." And he was absolutely right. I was an unhappy child who turned into an unhappy teenager who turned into an unhappy adult. And I was trying to fill the God-shaped hole in me with stuff. And I always had a very tense relationship with my dad. And when I came into Freemasonry, it's almost like that got ratcheted up a notch. Like already the relationship was not great.
Yeah.
But almost from the beginning, something happened where he would almost like try to provoke arguments with me. Like he would just come up to me and try to say stuff to get me to get mad. And in addition to all that, Freemasonry keeps you very busy. There are a lot of lodge meetings. There are a lot of social events that we participate in. So they try to keep you very busy between that and studies. And they also ask each Freemason to produce 3 pieces of architecture per year. A piece of architecture is really just a Masonic research paper. It can be as short as 3 pages or 20 pages if you prefer, something that will be read in the lodge. The idea behind this is that, one, they want you to understand the principles of Freemasonry, the application of the tools and all these different things. And it's also a way for your sponsor, your godfather or godmother, to gauge your advancement. And also, they can keep an eye on you in that if you are starting to get ideas that are not compatible with Freemasonry, you're writing this out, they can come and correct you.
I would love to fast forward a bit in your story and talk about why you wanted to jump out and what was happening in your life where you're like, I'm out of here. At this point, was Jesus on the table at all? Or what was making you, okay, yeah, I'd love to get into this part of your story.
So let's go to, I would say, circa 2014, because in addition to the Masonic Lodge meetings, remember how I had alluded earlier to spiritual conferences, which were being held by Denis, which was just a recruiting ground for Freemasonry. It was more than that, though, because Denis was actually selling off secrets of the higher degrees during these conferences and also during weekend workshops that he held. One of the ones that I had attended, which was a 5-weekend workshop called Knights Templar. I was very attracted to that for some reason. And as opposed to having the initiation at the beginning and then following up with the teachings later, this series of weekend workshops worked a little bit backwards in that you had 4 weekends where they would give you the teachings, and the last one would be your Knights Templar initiation. To be clear, it was discovered later by the lodge and the Grand Lodge that all of his weekend workshops, like, these are not actual titles that you get. Like, those diplomas are basically useless.
Okay.
They're just ways for Denis to siphon money out of people and also feed them secrets from the higher degrees. So during this final initiation, which was basically the entered apprentice initiation on steroids, it was an extremely, extremely stressful weekend. They started off during those 4 previous weeks by love bombing you, making you feel that, you're advancing very well, continue, keep it up, you're doing great. At the 5th one is where they really break you, where from the start, he lets people know, like, he walks into the room and says, you guys are not taking this seriously. He was like just chewing people out left and right. And it was basically that the entire weekend, putting people on the spot, also intentional sleep deprivation, which helped all this stuff. And during that weekend initiation, there was a girl named Vanessa who was dating Franco, and they had recently broken up. And so she had created like an online profile for dating. And Denis found out about this, and he basically humiliated her in front of everybody there.
Oh, wow.
And this was what was going on the entire weekend. So the stress and the cortisol were through the roof. And after that series of events, I realized that, you know what? There's something not right here. And because I had grown up with all this abuse, I had learned to normalize that. So it was hard for me to see that this was nonsense and I should just leave. So my life was becoming more and more stressful. Financially, things were not going well because I had, I think, 2 or 3 burnouts at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to cut my work down as much as I could, to the point where at one point I wasn't working anymore. And I was living off my savings.
Okay.
And my savings were almost completely depleted. And I think this is the kingdom of darkness doing what it does best. And so at this point, I was not in a very good position financially. And so I was thinking of leaving Freemasonry. And this is my opinion. This is my perception of things, is that the demons that were assigned to me let my worshipful master and some people in the lodge know that I was about to leave, but I was not happy with what was going on. Probably also told them that I was in a financial bind. So I get invited to Sylvain's house summer 2015. And so in my head, I've decided I want to leave Freemasonry. This is not working for me. And so the worshipful master of my lodge, when we're at this getaway at Sylvain's house, says, I need to speak to you like privately. So we walk out onto the road and we're in the middle of nowhere here, okay? And he looks at me and he says, I'm going to channel an entity now that has a message for you. And he proceeds to tell me that I am failing my life's incarnation, that I will be offered a choice very shortly. And if I make the wrong decision, I will be in for many, many years of suffering. So understand that I'm being primed at this point, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then, almost as if on cue, Sylvain says, well, I kind of understand what you're going through. If you need a job, I'm setting up something in the credit industry, and we can bring you aboard. What I found out later is that he was just doing this to get extra cash because all the people who applied to work for him had to take a course as a credit analyst. And at the time, the course was like $5,000 some odd dollars. So I was already stretched, and I saw this as my only real escape.
Mm-hmm.
Because mentally I was in a very, very bad place. Even the decisions I was making were not phenomenal. So I decided I'm going to join in on this. And I saw so much borderline illegal stuff happening during this course and working with Sylvain that I just said, that's it, I'm out. And that's when I quit working for him. And I think within a couple of weeks, I also gave in my resignation as a Freemason. But so things are still not going well in my life, because you can attract demons to yourself, but you can't remove them by yourself. Only Jesus can do that.
Yeah.
And I hadn't found Jesus yet. So on top of everything that I was experiencing, burnout, bad decision-making, financial situation was a wreck. I also found out that there was a broken pipe under my kitchen that needed to be repaired. And,
of course.
Right. As if on cue.
Yep.
And so they had to basically tear up my kitchen. So basically I was living in a disaster zone at this point. And my father at the time owned the building that I was living in. And he was known for liking to micromanage jobs like this. And so he would come in and tell the plumbers and the repair guys how to do their jobs. And I was just in such a bad state. And the apartment was a mess. And he came to me and he asked me a question. And I think I answered in a very nonchalant, callous way. And my father just completely exploded. I've never seen him angry like this.
Yeah.
And he was like, I don't want you here. You know what? Take all your stuff and get out. Just get out. I don't want you here. So on top of everything else, I was being evicted. And I think it's at that point that the spirit of death came over me, because the solution I came up with, well, you know what? I'll just end my own life and then I won't have to suffer anymore. But I think by the prompting of the Holy Spirit, my sister reached out to me. And I don't remember if I called her or she called me, but I was on the phone with her and I just started bawling uncontrollably. And I think she knew at that point that I had reached the point of no return. I hadn't said it in so many words, but I think she was afraid that I was going to do something drastic.
Yeah.
Kill myself or hurt somebody else. So she drove 2 hours from where she was living to come pick me up, just to come and stay with me. So she brings me over to her place in the country, and it's a beautiful early spring day. The birds are chirping, the sun is out. I'm in, basking in nature, and all I can think of is just ending my life. I was just so completely empty at this point that I didn't want to live. And it's a terrifying sensation, because it's almost like, when you stare into the abyss, eventually it stares back at you. And that's exactly what happened to me. And she was seeing that there was no reasoning with me. And I think that kind of freaked her out, because she wanted to get me out of that bad situation, brought me to her place. But at this point, she was like, I'm all out of ideas. I don't know what to do. So she freaks out. She says, you know what? I got to go take a nap. This is like too stressful for me. So I do the same. I curl up on her couch, and not even out loud, in my head, I reach out and I say, God, if you're real, I'm at the end of my rope. Show me the way. And at that point, something very interesting happens. All of this darkness, this gloom that is on me just starts to dissolve very peacefully. And God shows me my father when he was a little boy, and all the things that he had to experience.
Wow.
That he had no voice in, the things that were forced upon him.
Man.
And if you had asked me at that point, what are the 100 top things on your list that you'd like to do before you die? Forgiving my father would have been 118th. It was nowhere on the list.
Not up there.
Maybe 119.
Yeah.
There were times when I actually fantasized in my head about killing my dad, because I had just such a horrible relationship with him. And in a period of about 20 minutes, all that hate, all that animosity, all that darkness and despair just disappeared, like melted away. And I know that I had been delivered. And the weird thing is, you see a lot of deliverance videos where people are hacking and coughing and screaming and flailing about. And with me, there was nothing like that. It was like super peaceful. And I came out of that, and I got up off the couch, and I'd been completely changed at that moment by the Holy Spirit. Everything that the devil had done over decades had been completely shredded and melted away in a period of about 20 minutes.
Wow.
And my sister hears me stirring. So she comes out of her bedroom and she looks at me, and her jaw hits the floor. She says, my God, what happened to you? Your face is completely different.
Dang,
and I didn't realize it at that point, but the Holy Spirit had completely transformed my life at that point. All the problems that I had still existed, were still there. But at the same time, I was like, oh, okay.
She could see a difference in you physically.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Totally.
Yeah, it is wild.
Yeah. And like I said, that happened in a period of about 20 minutes. And at that point, I knew, you know what? I need to get on a bus, go back to Montreal. I need to forgive my dad.
Mm-hmm.
I need to make peace with him. And that's exactly what I did. I jumped onto a bus. I went back to Montreal. I met my dad. I said, Dad, I'm sorry for all the times and all the part that I played in provoking you, because like it or not, we all play a part in these things.
Yep.
So I told him, I don't want you to suffer anymore. Can you please forgive me? So he forgave me. I cried. He cried.
Wow.
We made up. And my life has been completely transformed from that point on. The way that I eat, the way that I think, everything had been changed from that point on. And you have to understand that at this point, I still wasn't reading my Bible, because even though I had left Freemasonry, I still believe that even though the people that I had been in the lodge with were jerks, that this was still the path to ascension.
Ah, interesting. Okay.
So right now I'm sort of between spaces. I'm not a Freemason anymore, but I'm still holding on to a lot of New Age beliefs. And the thing that set me straight, that actually allowed me to see and connect the dots, believe it or not, was a horror movie. I don't recommend people watch it. I'll name it just for the sake of keeping everything above board. It's called Hereditary. And it's about a woman who loses her mother. Her mother dies. And at her funeral, there's a lot of these weird, creepy people. And things start happening in the household. Her daughter dies in a horrific traffic accident. Son was driving the car. And she meets a woman who understands, like they start talking, and she tells them, "Oh, I understand that your daughter died just recently, and I'm used to contacting the spirit realm, so I'm getting a shiver just talking about this. And if you want, you can talk to your daughter again, And so they hold this seance, and I'm watching all this stuff and realizing this is what I was involved in. This is the kind of stuff that I was doing. And it scared me straight. Like, I watched this movie, and I don't recommend horror movies, but I think God used this particular instrument because it worked for me.
Yeah, it was personal.
I did not go back, and I realized at that point, I really need to read the Bible for myself. I need to understand this stuff for myself. And when you're going through particularly the Old Testament, like Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and all this stuff that I had participated in. And I mean, I was really convicted at that point, because I realized, had I been living at this time, I would have been stoned to death.
I saw you've got a book, Escaping Freemasonry. Have you had people reach out to you and tell you that your story of redemption, of salvation, has been that catalyst for them that's led them to the Lord, opened the doors? Maybe they weren't and a Freemason, but maybe they were in some other, stronghold.
Not so much from the book, but I did several video interviews. And on one of them that I think has something like 740,000 views. I mean, that thing just exploded. And that itself is proof alone. I had nothing to do with that. The other videos on that channel, I think the most views other than mine is like 120,000. This one just exploded. And I would read a lot of the comments, and some of them were along the lines of, you know what? I was invited to join a Masonic lodge, and by chance, I just came on your video and I watched this stuff, and I am never going back to that.
Dude, praise God.
Nope.
Yeah.
Praise God indeed. So
that's amazing.
It didn't come so much from the book, but this is the reason why I do these videos, is that this is an easier way to reach people. I can reach people all around the world that I would never be able to meet. I would be able to share with them what Jesus did for me, and that Freemasonry is just another path to hell. Think about this. Imagine every single life path you can follow in a pie chart. That one line at the top is Jesus Christ, the way, the truth, and the life. And the devil doesn't have to get you off 180 degrees. All he needs to do is throw you off a couple of ticks, and you're not on Jesus anymore. That's how the world works.
That's right.
And that's what people need to understand, that there is no way to the Father other than through Jesus.
Well, John, I so appreciate you taking the time to come on to share. Any final thoughts you want to share as we close? And then also, where can we point people to find your book?
You can find a link to my book on my Instagram. And for those who don't know, it's Mr. Mister .Moscato, Moscato. So you can find me on Instagram. And there'll be a link posted for my book for those who want to buy it. You can get it off Amazon, Apple Books, Barnes and Noble, and obviously there's a downloadable version if they prefer that over a physical copy.
Well, God bless you and take care. And listeners, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of No Longer Nomads. We release episodes every Tuesday at 5 a.m. If you want to like and subscribe on YouTube, that helps us out a ton. And if you're doing the audio version over on Spotify or even Apple Podcasts, make sure to share it, pass it on. A 5-star review helps a ton, and that helps us grow the show. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.